So if I can invite all our speakers to put their cameras on, Ibrahim, Eva, Takwa, and Michael, and colleagues, if you can raise your hands virtually using the Teams app, I shall try and take your questions. So if you can please raise your app, raise your hands using app, I will monitor it and allow you, invite you to unmute yourself and ask your questions. So yeah, please do that. And if you'd rather not speak, you can type your questions in the chat box and I shall somehow try to monitor that as well. Right, shall I, okay, there is a hand, there are hands, great. Bettina, your hand went first. Go on, unmute yourself, ask us your question. Hello.
Hello, thank you very much for this really fascinating panel on the COVID situation in Muslim context, which was really very informative for me. I'm not working on Muslim countries, as Takwa and Ibrahim know, but I'm interested in particular the situation with COVID. And my question is, well, all your papers reflected on the institutional and organizational changes and impact of COVID. Is there any research also done on the personal level on the experience? Just as a background, I'm referring last year during the first lockdown, there was a discussion on BBC Radio 4. Somebody spoke about his own experience in hospital with COVID, and that he had an experience which he interpreted as a religious experience and within the Christian context. And the journalist was very dismissive about it and more or less said, "Oh, this is drugs. Don't you realize it?" Which I found quite disturbing because it showed also disrespect against the ontology of the interviewer, and therefore I wonder whether there is any discussion or any similar events about what happens to patients when they come out and reflect about their situation with, in particular, well, now the treatment is a little bit different, but in the first stage they were highly drugged, they were under ventilation, so they had dramatic experience, and so how do they speak about it, and is there any research done? Thank you. Mm-hmm. As you could see, I'm thinking about this as my next research project.
Thank you, Bettina. Thank you. Very good question. Who wants to go on that? Speakers. Does anybody want to comment? Ibrahim, you're muted. Go on.
No, I'm unmuted. But anyhow, can you hear me? Am I muted?
Yes. Okay, yes, we can hear you now.
All right, I'm going to speak. You can use your cards for my answer here if I go too far. But in any case, I think this is a really good point, and because there is a lot of institutional presentations here. So at the very end of my slide, I did mention that I would like to have survey of people and their reactions to COVID. But the question for me is, who do you ask and how do you gather the pool of respondents? And so this is why I felt that I need to ask this institute to share with me their mailing list or email list and so forth. And that's a tough ask, to be honest with you, because that's really the precious part of an organization, is its mailing list. But still, I think it's important to do that because the moral majority that's expressed in the United States are really those who are not being part of the surveying. So I think this is a really good point, really good question, and I hope to address that by having surveys for individuals. Thank you, Dr. Bettina.
Thank you. Does any of our other speakers, do any of you want to come in on that question?
Yeah, I think if I may say something a bit, yeah.
Go on, Eva.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is we would love, like, I'm an anthropologist and I would love to hear the voices of my research subjects. I would love to directly like have more kind of intimate talk with them, interviews. But yeah, with the pandemic, we all cannot really go to our field sites. And the other thing is with the digital ethnography, that's also we need to be very careful doing that one, because I've been doing that one, digital ethnography, since the beginning of the pandemic. But I really have to make sure that I have a border what I can do and what I cannot do, especially during these difficult times. And some people, we cannot be too pushy, because we are entering their very private space. Some people might think that, oh, it's very easy now because we can just interview our informants directly. We can just call them, but actually we need. There are so many ethical issues in doing this digital ethnography, especially during this difficult time, and that's some of the researchers, they don't have that kind of awareness. So that's one of the things that make it a little bit difficult to really like hear directly the voices of our research subjects. So dealing with the agents, like dealing with a religious authority, that's more easier, because many of them, they are tech savvy and they know what we are doing.
Yeah, I agree, Eva, that this is a difficult time, and I'm also an anthropologist, and so I feel your pain.
Yeah. I mean, Bettina, linked to sort of, your ideas. I mean, I lost my father to COVID last week. It's all very raw. And I've wondered about, sort of mourning and how people are coping. And, Takwa, you mentioned counseling in sort of Malaysian context, but I've been wondering how, and I think this is ripe for research, to look at how communities and people who are mourning can be better supported, also in relation to sort of non-traditional, techniques around bereavement and handling of, dead bodies. But I'm going, okay. But yeah, I thought, that's another area where we need to respect, I think, religious views and religious worldviews. But moving on rapidly before, I lose control of myself. Laura, you have questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Cool. Yeah, just actually to pick up on Bettina's question as well. I'm doing my PhD research on Ramadan, and I collected last year in 2020 photo diaries of from participants about Ramadan. So it was more looking at the kind of personal experience and impact of the lockdown on kind of personal spirituality practices, things like that. But I won't go into too much detail. My question was for Ibrahim, actually, because I was quite interested in the case study of the Yaqeen Institute. And I think, I might be wrong, but I think you mentioned about how it impinged on personal agency of Muslims in terms of perhaps the content they were producing. I just wanted you to elaborate a bit more on that, actually.
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. This is what my research will ultimately do, but my preliminary findings is that the discussions on COVID were mainly in terms of inspirational, but those talks that did impinge upon the Sharia reaction, the legal reactions, actually I felt were also encouraging, because I think that what they were doing is actually giving greater agency, a sense of agency to the people, their audience, because they're saying what you're doing is not only okay, it's pious. I mean, this is one of those moments where you stay away from a mosque. It's better than going to a mosque. And of course, that's not preaching, that is actually taking a Sharia position. And so those are the few things that I saw, and these are very motivated people to have this content. So it's content like that addresses the individual choices, the risk assessments that everybody has to take, because in times of crisis like this and health issues, you are literally your own mufti. There is no test you need to present to somebody. If you are fearful of something, it doesn't have to be approved. You make this decision. And so it's content like that offers a greater lifeline of decision making when it comes to taklif and the whole notion of what can I do as an individual. I don't remember the last time we were in the pandemic. This is a unique situation, and unique situations should really be pursued. But that's the kind of content I'm looking at. How does it empower individuals to make choices guilt-free about these unmasked situations? But that's what I'm looking for, and I will narrow it down to language. I mean, the shoulds, don'ts, and do's that may relate to, wajib and mandub and mubah. And you try to relate the English language with the Sharia categories.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura and Ibrahim. Michael, you put your hand up. You want to come in on that conversation?
Yeah, I was just really interested in that idea that struck me from your presentation, Ibrahim, about being your own mufti, and I wonder whether I fall back a lot on the sort of the decentralized structure of authority notionally, and Islam favors that kind of freedom and agency, where those who feel that they need to take a more direct line from a religious authority above them would be hesitant in making those kind of decisions on the personal safety grounds. I mean, given that you're able to draw us into Muslim majority and Muslim minority contexts in your case studies, is that common in terms of the lay Muslim taking that interpretation of that action in their own hands based on the state health guidance they're confronting and their own feelings of safety and risk over and above what they feel are their religious obligations?
That's really an insightful observation. Of course, the idea that a person is known or her mufti, this is old, but we're in a situation where it is not sporadic or momentary. If you got a cold or flu or whatever, at that moment you make your choice. We're talking about a serious stretch of time, and that we have not experienced before, where possibly we're shut down, and other measures that we had to take. So we have a greater length of time that we're dealing with here and making decisions and risk assessments. It's not just about a day or two or one Friday or one day in Tarawih. It is really an unprecedented length of time where people have to make decisions about their personal worship. But that you're right, that this whole notion of mufti, being your own mufti, is common. But right now it's been, I would say, stretched out over a period of time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Haya, you've been waiting for some time. You have a question. Feel free. Yeah, let's see you.
Okay, is it me? Is it
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Haya. Go on, ask your question, please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for this outstanding panel. I would like to thank all the presenters. So I mean, unfortunately, I was, I arrived a bit late, so I missed the first part of the first presentation, which is very close to my research. I am a PhD student doing a Moroccan PhD students, and I'm working on the impact of digitization on religious authority among Moroccan diaspora in Germany. So that's why I think it's very close to the presentation of Professor Ibrahim. For him, that's why I want to ask him a question, because I just attended just the last part, and when he mentioned that the notion of religious authority has been expanded in the digital age, well beyond the notes of authority by Weber. So I just want to ask about how if he can elaborate more on this on this point. My second question is for Taqwa and Eva, who worked on the impact or the digital media uses and practices among Muslims, especially during the pandemic. I want to know if how they would elaborate, if they can elaborate on the impact of these digital media uses on in constructing or deconstructing religious authority. I mean, whether it's male or female.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Haya. Speakers, we've got about 11 minutes, so I'm going to ask you to be brief. But Ibrahim, could you come in, please, on the question about, media stuff?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for reminding me what we're doing today. Okay, very nice. So the point that it's a good point, and what I meant by that, many years ago I started looking at digital media and authority, religious authority. Gary knows this very well. But I noticed that every time I write something new, that so many different things actually fall under the authority ambit. That, it's not about, okay, what are the nodes of religious authority? Quran, Sunnah, Hadith, and the charismatic. If you are into Tasawwuf, if you're in Sufism, then the charismatic of your sheikh becomes of authority. But it's really beyond that. And so one thing that I'm working on now, and that is Islamophobia and counter narratives to Islamophobia. And when you really parse it out, this is an authority issue because you're trying to break these narratives that actually limit the authority and agency of Muslims who are minorities. And so that's also part of counter narratives. Are part of the authority question. It's not just about scriptures and so forth. It is really about lived religion. It's about living your day. So that's what I meant. And that came out during digital media. I don't think digital media created it, but the distinctions became sharper.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ibrahim. Taqwa, do you want to come in?
Yes, Sariya. Okay, to refer to the question about deconstructing, am I right? Because deconstructing or constructing religious authority. Yeah, in Malaysia, I'd say religious authority has both impacts, deconstruct and constructing, because it relates to the political power, and you see it has lots of external factors. But then it really constructing the religious authorities, power in terms of providing services to the public, and that's really helpful. I mean, in this during this pandemic, deconstructing in this sense is with regard to the information that the society get from other sources, and then they start to blame and things like that, think differently from what the government trying to do for the public. So it goes back to how powerful the data that you have and how powerful the strategy that you can do. And I'm speaking this in terms of Muslim majority country where religious authorities are part and parcel of the government.
Thank you, Taqwa. Eva, do you want to come in?
Oh, yeah, there have been so many studies on this one, the impact of digital religion. So I think, one of them is that many studies on gender and religion and the internet, for example, they mentioned how due to the presence of this internet and various social media platforms, then women, for example, Muslim women, usually they've been represented by media, but now with the internet and social media platform, they can self-represent themselves, and it also enables them to speak from a position of religious authority. And there have been so many studies on this one.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eva. We've got two more questions, one in the chat and one live. But before we go to those, I'm going to ask Michael my question. Chair's prerogative. Michael, were there, me being cheeky, were there any patterns, correlating the sort of type, form of media outlet and their coverage? So because I know you had Mend on there, you had the Muslim News on there, but then you also had the BBC and the CNN. So did you observe any patterns in who was producing what kind of reportage?
Yeah, well, I think some of the organizations that I was using to help were sort of more kind of not media organizations in their own right. So I would put Mend in that category, and also the page from BIMA, which is really these are sort of media critical, but also media supportive groups. BIMA's trying to put information to there and be a resource for journalists. So the patterns were really, I think I need to look closer to really see that, but part of what I was suggesting is that there are stories storylines, the broad storylines that get picked up that kind of all the media are going to draw on, to the extent that someone's going to be talking about, is there a concern about vaccine hesitancy in British Muslim populations? It wouldn't just be one media outlet that would do that. It'll be various of them, and they might bring their own slant to it. So you can imagine how the Telegraph would report that story, or how the Daily Mail would report that story, but then the Guardian will take a Guardianish kind of slant on it, and they often are using it in a way as cudgels against what they perceive as their media opponents, with the participants in the stories almost being kind of just the chess pieces that are slid around the board. And sometimes that's media organization to media organization, where they see themselves in a competition. And sometimes it's about the mainstream media against this alternative media space, where, as I mentioned, more of these kind of conspiracy theory type and fake news items are emerging. The news media reporting on it, they're trying a little bit to show how they are better, they're responsible, they're good citizens, and not fomenting Islamophobia. We do need to ask, well, what is the effect of reporting these things and, you know, being the amplifier? I won't say unwittingly, because I don't think they're that stupid, but they are complicit in that, whether they, even though they want to put themselves at a critical distance. So I think those are maybe some of my observations. I didn't say that. I think that, you know, we have a general feel of the character of tabloid coverage versus, say, broadsheet coverage, which we understand prior to COVID-19, and I don't think there were any differences really about that. I was noting that how a praiseworthy story of the Muslims comes through when it's Prince Charles delivering the message. So that was just a side observation to it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Now we've got 3 questions, but I think we only have time for 1. And so sadly, I'm going to prioritize Hussam's question because he asked it ages ago in the chat box. So it's a question for Ibrahim. Did you observe anti-lockdown online Sharia-based reactions, responses by Muslims in Doha or Chicago? So Ibrahim, that's one's for you.
Just real quick, I have not seen the reaction that I've seen, for example, in the, let's say, the Christian community, evangelical community in the United States, and maybe because they have more skin in the game, in the political game, than, let's say, Muslim minorities do, and their reading of the, you know, the intrusion of the government in their personal lives, and that's a big deal for evangelical movements here. But so for Muslims, I think that their responses tend to be actually more open. This is what I've seen, and in Doha, it was sort of a no-brainer. You have a religious authority there. You have the Al-Qaf, and they're saying things with the Ministry of Health, and so I don't think anybody doubted their intentions. It's really, the problem is not the mosques, are people going to the mall without masks and this kind of thing. I mean, I think that was a greater issue than religious institutions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ibrahim. We've got 3 more minutes left, and I'm sure Gary will have some housekeeping. So Arsalan, I'm very sorry I can't take your question, but Gary says, please drop it in the chat and the speakers will look at it. But my apologies for not being able to take it. Thank you, panelists. I mean, if we were in a room together, we would have all, you know, clapped our hands together. But I do encourage colleagues to give our speakers, our brilliant speakers, a virtual applause. You will see the comments in the chat. They're all very positive. I'm just going to, Gary gave me permission to plug my special issue. I heard a number of speakers saying they want to potentially consider publish their findings. Me, together with Dr. Sufyan Dogra, we are editing a special issue of the journal Religions, and the special issue is going to look at Islamic responses to COVID. So if anybody's and it is a Q1 journal, highly ranked journal. So if any one of you are interested, please send me an email. Religions has agreed to drop APL charges. So it's a good opportunity to get something published in a high-ranking journal without paying a lot of money. So that's my plug, Gary. Thank you for allowing me to have it. Colleagues, I wanted to attend the rest of the presentation, the rest of the conference, but I just find the subject matter a bit too emotive for me, given where I am at the moment. But thank you very much. Over to Gary, and thank you, Gary, for letting me chair what I think was a really, really insightful, intellectually engaging panel. Over to you, Gary, for any housekeeping.
Right, well, thank you very much, Sariya, and thanks very much for chairing the panel. It's been great just to sit back and watch and tweet and whatever one does. So thank you to all the speakers. We have panel 2. Can I remind everybody that there are separate links for each of the panels, and they have been emailed to everybody. So please use the right panel link for panel 2. Panel 2 will start at 13:45-ish. And we have got a number of different presentations coming through on podcasting, on pilgrimage, something on the digital analog pendulum, and reflections on engaging with the Muslim community through the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's lots of relevant and interesting content there that you can engage with. I think there'll be a continuity in the themes from the first session, so hopefully, time zones permitting, colleagues will be able to stay on and listen to those papers. So that's 13:45 for the second one, and then the third one will be at 16:30. So hopefully we'll see some or all of you a bit later on, but I'll be turning off the cameras very shortly. So thank you again to everybody for their questions, and to the panelists and chair as well. Many thanks.